So, hi, I'm KB with Nerdophiles. How are each of you?
Doing great. How are you
Good.
doing?
I'm doing wonderful. What a fantastic series, truly. It had so many lovely, lovely layers. So there's a line in episode 6 where Sullivan actually says you have to bury your old self in order to become your best self. And that's kind of a theme that these three characters relive over and over during the course of this season. So by season's end, what do you think is the most impactful thing that your respective characters kind of walked into Paris Island carrying that they're finally able to lay down in service of their best selves? And I'll start with you, Miles, first to talk about Cam.
Yeah, I think for Cameron, I think his story is sort of similar to what a lot of queer people experience growing up. This we're sort of trained to hide ourselves because we're afraid of how people will react around us to us being gay and whether or not that means we won't be accepted or we'll lose friendships or family. And I think because of that, a lot of times we sort of stick to things that we're comfortable with and good at, so as to not fail or stick out. And Cameron is sort of put in this place where he has to do all of these things that he's uncomfortable with, and he has to fail, and he has to rely on these people around him that are not necessarily people he would typically think he would connect with. And I think what I love about the show is once that's taken away from Cameron, the safety of blending in, he suddenly discovers all these things that he's actually really good at. And he grows so much as a person and creates these relationships with people that he probably wouldn't have had in the outside world. And I think that it's a really beautiful learning experience for him.
Mhm.
Oh, I love that answer. And what about for you, Liam? Just when it comes to Ray, what do you feel like he walked into Paris Island carrying that he's finally able to kind of lay down by the season's end?
Yeah, I mean, the weight of legacy of his father, of where he came from, of the expectations of being the best, of being exceptional, and I think if anything, his journey over the series is kind of learning the false promise of that, of what you said, of you have to bury your old self to become your new self, and maybe the fact that we are trying to hide these things about ourselves. I mean, the fact that Miles is gay, the fact that Ray has a panic disorder, that's ultimately what's holding them back. In that, in order to become your best self, you can't just bury the parts of yourself that you don't like. You have to embrace them.
Mhm.
Oh, I love that. And last but certainly not least, for you, Max, when it comes to Sullivan, what do you feel like he walks into Paris Island carrying that he's finally able to kind of lay down?
I think with Sullivan, he's carrying so much. He doesn't necessarily have a network of people that he can, get whatever he's carrying off his chest. I think Sullivan is such a closed book and such a monster in the show of this aggression and sort of like a pressure cooker. And as the show goes on, you get to see what kind of things he's carrying in his pack that created this monster, essentially. And sort of the way that they say the line, you have to bury your old self to become your best self. Almost when I hear it back in Sullivan's terms, it's almost like not good advice. It's almost like hide who you are in order to become something that you wish to be. So it's good advice, however you take it, and also bad advice, I think, in Sullivan's terms.
Ooh, I like that you said that because I do think that by the end of Sullivan's journey, I think it's almost good advice for him. Like he almost listens to it, but in a new way, in a
Mm,
new fashion, when he's kind of like, okay, and he passes the torch on to Cameron.
mm.
I think in some ways he kind of learns a lesson through his journey and through Cameron, oftentimes through their relationship, how he can be almost a better person through that though.
Yeah,
But
student becomes
listen.
the master. What is that? Is
Yeah,
that a
Yeah,
thing?
yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. Well, listen, I think it's actually just a really, really brilliant and beautiful series. I truly cannot wait for audiences to see it. And just thank you so much for taking the time to chat with Nerdophiles. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank
Nice.
you.
Thank
Thanks so
you.
Thank
much.
you. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Hi, I am KB with Nerdophiles. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Listen, the writing on this show is so layered and so nuanced, and you wrote such a beautiful episode in episode six, that really kind of felt like the show being the perfect convergence of your life's experiences. So first, I know you mentioned that the writer's room was quite a while ago. So first, how did you get involved with the project? And then how did your experiences kind of as a Marine help shape the episode that you were tasked with writing?
Yeah, I mean, I got to give props to my superstar agent, William Brown at CAA. So that's how I got involved with the project, and he brought it to my attention, and I was like, dude, like this is my life story. I mean, well, at least a part of it anyway. You know, every Marine goes through boot camp. So I was like, yeah, dude, like get me in. And then I had a great meeting with our creator, Andy Parker, and we just kind of hit it off from the spot. Remember we had coffee and I forgot that area, but dang, what's Silver Lake? Yeah, we had coffee in
Oh,
Silver, and it was crazy because like after me and him kind of hit it off, and I remember I ended up taking him to the recruit depot down in San Diego. And so he was able to actually experience like, seeing like recruits in the wild, in training. He got to step on the yellow footprints, which was really cool. And, just kind of get a glimpse, and a peek behind the curtain and just kind of see, how we work in the real world.
so wait, were you the only Marine in the writer's room?
No, no, no. We had Megan, who was a captain in the Marine Corps. And Greg, who also whose book we
But
adapt.
right, right, right.
Yeah. So yeah, so it was three of us, all different experiences. I believe Greg was in the Corps back in the 70s. Megan having been on the officer side. So, they've got like their own, they're kind of like their own experience and things like that. And then obviously myself, who kind of represented the kind of the current the current enlisted side of the house.
Man. So how did kind of the majority of your experiences as a Marine help shape this particular episode? Because this episode is really heavily focused on Sullivan. This is really his kind of big episode and the mysteries surrounding him as he makes his way to Paris Island. So it's a bit of a flashback episode so that we can
Yeah.
finally kind of unravel those things for him.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't so much just to focus on Sullivan, but I believe, in the episode title, the things that we carry, I think being able to focus on all of the things that, these different characters carry, whether it be, anger or regret. Um, and I think the character that I really, um, that I really kind of, you know, uh, take with is McKinnon because he's carrying legacy. My great uncle was a Montford Point Marine, so I was able to kind of like sneak that little bit in there
Yeah.
with McKinnon, and just like the history of not only being black but being a black Marine, and how back in the day before we were all integrated. So I think that weighs heavily on McKinnon, and that legacy of also too, like he just had a kid as well, and so you're kind of really seeing that side of it. Just that family aspect. And coming from a family, with military background. My grandfather, he served, he was in the Air Force. Like I said, my great uncle was a Montford Port Marine. My other grandfather, my dad's dad, he was in the Army in World War II. And so I think a lot of this episode really is for me, it was just kind of unpacking, a lot of the personal um, stories, lineage, trauma, pain, anger that we just carry as individuals. Because at the end of the day, like, the cool thing, well, the crazy thing about boot camp is that, that they would always joke and say, our drill instructors would always joke and say that we're breaking we're tearing down and breaking down like who you were as a civilian just to build you back up as a Marine. And so in that you are unpacking everything that made you who you were up to that point. And then they've got to like, it's basically like a new build, it's like, hey, we're going to keep the studs, but we're going to tear down this whole house. And with it goes the ghosts of, all of the nasty civilian ways that they would jokingly say to us, and because they've got to make you into something different.
I'm glad you said that because one of the most poignant, I think, for me when I was watching the episodes, like lines in the episode, is when Sullivan says, "You have to bury your old self to become your best self." Like he is saying it to Cam, but I think in a lot of ways, because it happens right after Ochoa's tragic death, he's telling himself that in some ways. So, I mean, I feel like in this episode, what did you feel like when kind of crafting it that Sullivan, what narratives did Sullivan really have to, I guess, kind of bury at Paris Island in order to kind of move forward? Because I think that's kind of a pivotal point for him in this episode as well.
Yeah, I think it's because I don't want to necessarily call it weakness. I know my dad would always tell me, he was like, don't let someone call your strength a weakness. And I think there is something to a lot of times being in a place of flux where, you are confused whether or not your strength is a weakness or your weakness is a strength, and feeling like, man, I gotta like bury this part of myself in order to just either survive or to continue to fly under the radar, or just to make it in whatever the rules that society or an organization has set forth for you.
Yeah, that's true. And I'm glad that your dad said that because I never really thought about it from that perspective. Like, never let anyone else tell you that.
Mhm.
Because oftentimes we tell ourselves that, but even I wasn't even really thinking about that. And that's true. Like, never let anyone else tell you that your strength is a weakness. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
But I do find that, kind of through the episodes as well, something that you alluded to just in your experience as a Marine is how, and what we see throughout this entire series is that kind of becoming a warrior at all costs. Like it really feels like the characters, particularly obviously these recruits are down the path to becoming warriors, but that's filled with a lot of kind of, unhealthy and sometimes toxic practices from an
yeah.
emotional and psychological standpoint. And some of that they brought in, like you were saying, they brought in with them.
Mhm.
And so it feels like, which is why I really love the title of your episode, they are carrying so much. And in some ways, it almost feels like it's impossible for them to lay it down. So just for you, kind of as an artist, every project that we work on really heals us in some way. So how did working on this project kind of help heal you? And what did it teach you maybe about the things that you were carrying that you needed to let go of?
Man, it's interesting that you say that. Adam Driver, who phenomenal actor, he has this thing, this organization where veterans are able to kind of unpack themselves creatively on stage. And, for me, always, even before that existed, I always felt that creatively as a writer, that was kind of like my way of kind of coping with a lot of different things that I experienced in the Marines. And, it's just like, okay, cool. Like, if I guess writing it out and seeing these other characters kind of go through that metamorphosis in a way kind of helped me, become my better self, and blossom into that butterfly, so to say. So yeah, I mean, I think there are, for me anyway, as a writer, I guess being able to see or create characters and scenarios where we have these characters go through things that allow me as a person to work things out, where it's just like, oh man, here's this conversation, because I feel like all of us at some point we're kind of like at home by ourselves, and we'll just have like a conversation with ourselves out loud, you know
Yes.
but it's like, man, you know what I'm saying? Like if you want to get in an argument with this person, but you didn't, it's just like, and then you're like playing out the conversation, how it would play out. And you're just like, oh, I would have said this, da 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 da, and blah blah. And then you're just kind of like coming up with all of that stuff. And it's cathartic in a lot of ways. So I feel like, it's just a nonstop cathartic session that you're having with yourself, kind of like, an inner Cameron. And and you're just working things out, and so you just get to do it just with words, on the page, and it's dope because, obviously writing is rewriting, and so, you go through it and it's like, oh man, that didn't really like work out. And then you're able to go back through it again. And then so then from project to project, not only are you honing the craft, but you're able to kind of like get all of these different different views and viewpoints from characters, from individuals that you kind of pull from your life. There's a couple of characters in the show that were inspired by just Marines that I served with.
Oh,
Um,
which
and
ones?
Santos
Uh-huh.
is the one who he's actually based off my best friend and who was best man at my wedding, Polanco. So that's why he has like the same first name and last name because my boy Polanco is like that. And General Cochran, who is actually named after my drill instructor. Yeah, so me and him are still cool and friends on FaceTime and even my senior drill instructor, like, so I was able to kind of keep up with them. And I remember I remember Cochran, he was the first one that kind of told me uh it was during family day, and I remember I was walking from the bank because one of the things our senior told us was like, hey, get Navy Federal, like get this bank, just the stuff that you know and I was like, okay, cool. So I'm like walking from that and family day, and I ran into Cochran at the PX, and he was just like, yeah, he was like, we just fucking with you, Jones. He was, saying it's all a game. He's like, it's all a game. We just fucking with you. We gotta fuck with you. I was like, damn. I was like, okay, and it wasn't personal because up to that point, I felt like everything was just like so personal. When people just kind of pick at you and things like that. But in that case, I felt like they pick on the ones who they feel are the strongest, um, and in order to kind of make us better individuals and better Marines. I think General Petraeus, said one time during a Senate committee hearing, and he was just like, hey, we're not training Marines to go fight a pillow fight, so like we are training these young men for war. And the training regimen has to reflect that. It's just like you can't half-ass it back here and then expect them, us to then deploy and be effective. Like, so you gotta you gotta put it in, and sometimes that does lean into a bit of the crazy, which is why they call us crazy. But hey, that's what we got to do to defend the nation. So it is
You
what
know
it is.
what? It's interesting that you say that because at the end of season one, it's the realization for Cameron. Like they're looking at the TV
Yeah,
screen, he and Ray, and he was like, oh, wait, a deployment. Like it's almost like he was like, I've gone through the hard part, and he thought
yeah,
that was going to be it. And
yeah.
then as soon as you're celebrating the fact that, like, oh my gosh, I made it, I'm officially a Marine, turns on the news, and it's like, oh, well, welcome. And now he's
There's
like,
no way.
oh, crap. Like,
I mean, the real thing. Yeah, yeah.
right, right. It's almost like Cameron looks like, oh, I didn't expect to actually be deployed. And it was like, well, Cameron, now what did you think you went through all this for? Right,
What you think this was, man?
right, right. So, yeah, but I could definitely tell too in Santos, because he does also say something to your point, which I feel like maybe you wrote it, but he says it's not personal. Like he starts to tell kind of the other recruits, like, you can't take everything personally. You just have
Yeah.
to, it's the head game. He was like, you just have to survive and make it through, and you're almost at the finish line. Like, don't give up.
Yep. Yep. And that's what it is. Yeah.
Well, listen, I just think the series is so fantastic. I really hope you guys get renewed for season two. But wait, before I go, I do have to ask, whose idea was it to do kind of the inner Cameron in the way that it's portrayed on the show? Because I actually do really like that. The way
Oh,
he
yeah.
talks to himself.
I think that's Andy. I think that was all
Okay,
Andy.
okay,
Um,
yeah.
yeah. So that's. I mean, that was one of the things that kind of drew me to the project. I remember I read the pilot, before meeting with Andy, and I was like, man, this is kind of cool. And I remember they described it. He described it as was it Phoebe Waller from Fleabag? He was like, yo,
Uh-huh,
it's
uh-huh.
her kind of like looking into the mirror. It's more so it's her like looking at another her, and they're just having that conversation. I was
You
like,
know
yo,
what?
that's dope.
Yeah, I never thought about that actually. I'm glad you, now that you said, I'm like, oh yeah, that would be exactly how it is, like the presentation of that. Because, you
Yeah.
know, it's just funny because when the other Cameron comes out, you're almost like shocked. So, and then based on the conversations that they keep having, you're like, oh, like he is really having an internal dilemma. Like he's like, I really need to sort through this.
Yeah, all Andy. Yeah, yeah. No, that was all Andy.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with Nerdophiles. I truly cannot wait for audiences to see Boots because it is really, really good. And I hope audiences stick with it and y'all get another season because, again, it is fantastic.
Yeah, no, same. Super excited for the show to finally come out and for you guys to see it, man. Because like I said, it's been a long journey to kind of to get it here and a lot of hurdles to kind of overcome with the strikes and definitely shout out to our late great producer Norman Lear, because he did a lot to to make this show happen. So yeah, so glad for it to finally come out on the 9th, Netflix.
Yes. Thank you.